Hello, everyone. My name is Gitika Gorthy, and today I'm very excited and honored to be interviewing a very special space champion, Mr. Andrew Parris. From working at NASA for over 13 years and founding the Inspire 24, Andrew is truly a champion for inclusivity in the aerospace industry. The Inspire 24 is an organization of like minded, space positive people dedicated to promoting access to space for all. I have seen Andrew's activity on Twitter and the incredible outreach work he does for space professionals and enthusiasts of all ages. And I'm incredibly excited today to dive into Andrew's journey into the aerospace sector, learn about some of the work he's conducted at NASA, and some of his future career goals as he continues to evolve his place in this growing space economy. So, welcome, Andrew. Thank you so much for taking your time to conduct this interview, to share your story, and inspire the next generation of aerospace leaders.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Love to talk space.
Yes, to kick off, I wanted to start off by talking about the Inspired 24. When I first came across this incredible group, I was just very excited to see, first off, that there was such an inclusive group to promote space activity and to help, people from all backgrounds with no age limits, no boundaries, no degree requirements, to have this place to learn about the industry and find career opportunities. It was very magical. And so I have to start off by asking about what inspired you to found the Inspired 24 and kind of what are your visions for the group and where do you see the Inspired 24 continually evolving in the next 10 to 15 years?
Well, that's a great question. It's actually one of those things that just kind of happened. What this the genesis of the Inspired 24 was actually from the Inspiration 4 mission. There was a whole group of us who signed up to for the seats on the flight, and most of us most of us didn't win. Only one, Mr. Chris Dombrowski. Sorry, he had a name there. Anyway, but the rest of us got invitations to come watch the launch. So we all connected via social media and met up at the Port Canaveral for dinner the night before the launch. And we were all sitting around just talking, introducing ourselves to each other and talking about all of our interests. And it was, once again, a varied group of different people from different backgrounds. And we were at one point talking, and I realized that I was amongst a very unique group of people. And I even said it out loud, which was kind of a humorous moment. I said, one of us is going to fly, somebody at this table is going to fly in space one of these days. Well, interestingly enough, one of the original 24, Ruben Salinas, has been selected to fly in space with Space Plus. So, like I said, it was one of those things where karma seemed to be on our side, and we've had more than our share of moments like that happening in this group. It just made the most sense at the time because we are all people with the same goal, but we're coming in different paths and different journeys. So I thought, well, we should be able to help each other, and that's what it's become. It's just basically become a way to help people fulfill their dream of going to space and experiencing the overview effect. I'm not the only founder. There were 24 of us if you consider the original 24. In fact, our 25th one was Iman Jahir, who you just interviewed. He is actually somebody I met before the rest of the group, and he and I were communicating about our wanting to get together at the I-4 launch. He was actually part of the VIP group with Dr. Cyan Proctor, because he had been with her one of the NASA astronaut candidate classes when she was a finalist, and he was also. So they were friends, and they connected, and we all connected. And it's kind of one of those things where the group has just grown kind of organically from people knowing other people and so forth. And once again, just from any and all types of groups, we're worldwide. We're only about 140 now, but it seems to be a comfortable fit right now. But our plans are basically just keep doing what we're doing. At this point, we're just helping people be the best at what they want to do in the space industry. We've got several members who have applied to and been accepted to the world's largest analog astronaut next year. We've got, excuse me, we have one member, Brooke Edwards, who decided she wanted to become a space reporter. And so she went off and made the applications. Now she's a reporter for Florida Today, and she just reports on the space program, which I would love to have that job.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I just have to say, I mean, I'm very honored to be part of such an incredible group. I remember when I first wanted to enter the aerospace industry and I, formed my little, it was Twitter at the time, X now, like I formed my little account and I was like, I want to connect with people who are space enthusiasts. And I had such a tough time, first off, like when I would DM people or ask for advice, it was really difficult for me to find a group of people that I could learn from and grow from and absorb information. I was only like 15 at the time when I think I got Twitter. So I just had no place to go. And a few years down the line, when I discovered this group, I was like, I wish I knew about this a few years ago when I was completely lost and I had no idea about anything space related. I could have learned from such incredible people who are so enthusiastic about space. And being a part of that group now, it's just a great place to one, learn, but also to network. I think networking
Yeah.
is very big in the space sector. It's such a small and fun community. And I think this community means so much more than just, a bunch of people who want to fly to space, but it's this community you can rely on for support and opportunities like you mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. We uh, we seem to be a pretty varied group, but we all share that same dream of not only for ourselves, but we want to share it for everyone else. Democratizing space for everyone is the key phrase these days. One thing I also wanted to mention about the Inspire 24 is we're not just sitting there talking about it; we're actually doing things. We have our own space flight training classes that we've set up with Chase, which is a human Center for Human Space Exploration at the University of Arizona, with Trent Tresh, who's also a member. And it basically involves 2 days of hands-on spaceflight training, a day of the spacesuit training up at the Biosphere 2 up in north of Tucson, and then a day of water egress training, parachute entry training, and Gumby suits. And to be honest with you, it's a lot of fun. It's a great team building experience. We've had 2 classes. I graduated on the first class, and then Trent brought me back as a trainer for the second class, so I was able to help them. And it's something we're going to try to do on a regular basis. We're right now scheduled for a class in November. And we're talking to other groups in the space world, even in the Web3 world, about bringing their people in and doing this kind of training too.
That's incredible. Yes, I know. I wish there were even more opportunities, scholarship opportunities. I mean, I know as a student, it's very difficult to find a lot of opportunities. And because a lot of these are advertised in such a nice way for everyone who's part of the Inspire 24 and who joins, it's, very accessible. And I feel like if there are more opportunities that open up like that, where there are, opportunities for students to get involved too, I think it would continuously just democratize space as we know it. And every time I see you on social media, I always think, oh my gosh, he's such a ball of energy. Like you're constantly so active and you're everywhere, I feel like. So I have to ask, like, how do you do everything? And, what does your day to day, look like? What are you really focused on right now? Because I feel like you're just, you're the person that like knows everyone and branches out and you really make a conscious effort to get to know people. So I'm just curious, what does your day to day, look like right now that you've retired from NASA?
Well, I'm not retired from working. I'm still work full time. I'm a broadcast television engineer, and I travel for 240 days a year, which is a lot. I'm a grandfather at this point, so I don't have any kids at home. So I've got some free time when I'm home, which is where I find the time to do some of it. But to be honest, I'm spreading myself way too thin. But there's just so much going on. I mean, I'm helping out with Iman on his quest for his flight. We're just waiting. Someday they'll tell us he's going to fly, so we can get going on it. But everything else, there's the we're planning an I-24 meetup at the Polaris Dawn launch. We're waiting for a launch date now with SpaceX's second stage anomaly. A lot of things have been put on the back burner, but we're waiting to see what happens. And we're always coming up with new ideas. We have a new newsletter, and we've got to find material for that. We've got plenty of members we like to use for our spotlight. But yeah, just day to day is just trying to stay up with it on top of everything else going on in my life.
That's amazing. I mean, your passion really, really shines through. And I was very surprised to find that you were at NASA for 13 years before changing to what you currently mentioned. But I'm curious. So, what was your role specifically at NASA, and what were your projects over those 13 years that you focused on?
Actually, I was television engineer. That's how I got the
Oh,
job.
wow.
I actually started work with a contractor out in California
Mhm.
after the Challenger accident. They had to staff back up to support launches and landings. So I got a job working for TAP Broadcasting out at Edwards Air Force Base at Dryden, doing landing support, shuttle landing support. And
Oh,
we had a fleet of trucks that would go out, TV trucks that go out on the lake bed and get the live video of the shuttle landing. I was on
that's
TV2,
amazing.
which was a van that traveled with the convoy, and we would go up to the orbiter. And when the crew come out, I was the engineer in the truck maintaining the equipment, and then we had a camera guy out there, and he would follow a handheld camera guy would follow around the crew around,
Wow.
and then once they left, we would stay and do tile survey. So basically, what I meant is all the shuttle tiles were unique, and they needed to get a head start on examining them and make sure they're okay. And if anything was damaged, get that information back to the Kennedy Space Center and start having them create new ones and figure out what they do. So they used our TV camera, and we would set up underneath, and we'd have a tile technician point one out. We'd set the camera up, and they'd send the pictures back to the Johnson Space Center and the Kennedy Space Center, and that would take 5-6 hours afterwards. But one of the bonuses for that job was that late in the day, as they were getting ready to roll the orbiter back, they would let us crawl into the orbiter flight deck and the mid deck, and you got to explore what it was like. And it's amazing how small the cabin, the crew cabin, and the flight deck were. It was space is the only place that was comfortable because you could float around. Otherwise, it was just
Yeah.
cramped as
Yeah.
all get out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I spent 3 years there doing shuttle landings, and then 1990, the company I was working for lost the contract in California, but they picked the contract up back in Houston, which is where I was from. So I got to move back to Houston and work at the Johnson Space Center, doing which is essentially was mission support and public affairs support. And I got to do a lot there. That was the most exciting 10 years of my life up till now. I got to fly 0G with the astronauts for a
Wow.
couple of years. I got to scuba dive at the WEDF and the NBL doing rehearsing spacewalks. Got to travel for NASA a lot. Got to go to Russia 3 times. Got to go to watch the ISS Crew 1 launch from Baikonur Cosmodrome. And as a bit of a space historian, that was really, really fulfilling to get to go to see Baikonur, which, up until a few years before was as part of the Soviet Union, and it was very top secret, and very few Westerners had been there, but to get to see what it was, the history back then. Even got to see, before it was destroyed, the original Buran Soviet space shuttle, it was exciting to see it, but it was also a bit depressing because to realize this thing was not going to ever fly again, and it wasn't properly put in a museum before unfortunately, in the early 2000s, the building it was in collapsed due to lack of maintenance. There's apparently 2 mock-ups still there that they're worried about the same thing happening. Anyway, so working at the Johnson Space Center, working in NASA, I got to do shuttle landing and launch support also there. Went to the Cape quite a few times. I sometimes have to pinch myself about the things got to do. A lot of it was, it was all behind the scenes. I like to say I was space history adjacent. You can see a picture of something going on. I'm probably in the back row back there, like to hang out with the Expedition 1 crew at Baikonur. That was just, I look back and go have to pinch myself, like I said. But anyway, in 2000, unfortunately, NASA was going through some budget cutbacks and my position got eliminated. So I left and went to start work for Mark Cuban to start the first all high definition television network called HDNet. And then I switched over to another company called AP, a group out of Pittsburgh, and we do a live sports for all over the nation and all over the world. And I'm currently still with them. But back in 2021, when the Inspiration 4 invitation came out, that's when I said, let's put it back in space gear and let's start going, because I've been a space nut all my life.
Wow, wow. I mean, first off, I think a lot of people don't realize how many verticals there are in the space sector. I think you're the first television engineer that I've interviewed, so I'm so excited to learn about your career, and how you were able to still integrate space, even if now you're no longer with NASA. The way you're integrating space, I think, is something is it's very nice to see, because a lot of people think if they're not in a space career, they are no longer associated with the industry, which is completely not true at all. Because space has so many verticals, you can, still engage in a lot of different ways with the space sector, even if you're not a typical aerospace engineering, physics major, whatever the, stereotypical degrees are. And so that really comes to my next question. You mentioned you were always like a space nerd. And so where do you remember, growing up, what the aha moment for you was to be excited about space and to enter the aerospace industry, and kind of what led you down the path of specifically becoming a television engineer, and how did you know that that was a career you could pursue in the space industry? Because I feel like when people think, oh, I want to go into space, they don't realize you could become a television engineer or, an aerospace physician, or they don't think of any of the other unique verticals. So how did you, first off, what was your aha moment? And then how did you discover your, unique intersection with the aerospace sector?
Well, well, my aha moment was the Apollo 8 Christmas Eve live broadcast from around the moon in 1968. I was 7 years old, and I just we were watching on TV. It was something we were aware of. But when I saw that first blurry black and white video, and you could just make out the limb of the moon, and the astronauts are reading from scripture, it was something that I don't think many 7-year-olds get. But it was a moment I realized, hey, this is a bigger thing. This is something I want to do. I have three other brothers, and we're all interested in it as kids. But it stuck with me. It stuck with me very hard. And I had my aha moment, but a couple of years later, I had my own no moment, which was when I decided I wanted to be an astronaut. I found out shortly afterward that you couldn't wear glasses. Well, unfortunately, I wear glasses, and you wear corrective lenses. That was the early 70s. It changed into the 80s when the shuttle program came in, and they started allowing people with more varied backgrounds, non-pilots especially. But by in that early 70s, when I realized that was something I wasn't going to be able to do, it kind of changed my course. And the way I got into television was actually my dad started in television in the late 50s. He was a theater major at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. And when they were putting together the first TV studios, they needed people who know how to light and stage and put up sets. So he got involved with that. And then his four sons all ended up in television. My brother Chris is older than me. He's an engineer like me. Then myself, my brother Tim, who's a producer director in Houston for live sports, and the youngest Patrick is a news anchor in Tucson.
Oh,
And
wow.
so it's the family business. And so that was just it's the way it went. And the way I actually got into NASA was I didn't realize until oh gosh. Yeah, it was probably just before the Challenger accident, because we had I was working in Houston, and we had an engineer come work for us who had been at the Johnson Space Center, and he told me about everything they do. And I thought, that's great. I hope one day I could. Well, then the Challenger accident happened, so they were staffing down, and then a couple more engineers from NASA came to work at our TV station. And so when they were staffing back up, they all knew I wanted to get in the space program, so they connect me with the folks out in California. So that was my way into the space program.
Wow, yeah, I mean, I feel even to this day, what's shocking is many people, including like adults, students, don't realize that there are spaces like its own little world. So every career you're going to need in the real world, every degree, every skill, every expertise you're going
Oh
to
yeah.
need just for the space sector. And that is something counselors, professors, a lot of them don't realize. I'm particularly interested in aerospace medicine and the intersection between healthcare and space. And every time I mention my interest, not just like my neighbors or my family, but counselors and teachers are like, that's interesting. Like, what is that? And they give me these like weird, like, oh, is that a real career? And it's really funny that to this day, it's still the space industry is so stereotyped, and a lot of these careers are not known, which is one of the reasons we started this podcast series, because I wanted students to realize, like, hey, like, you don't need an aerospace
Yeah.
engineering degree or a physics degree or even a STEM degree at all to be involved. And I think that's just amazing how you were able to find your way. And I think persistence is sometimes the key to that.
Yes, I completely never give up. And it's even more today as commercial space becomes the larger future for employment. People don't realize that the common people don't realize we're going to have multiple commercial space stations after the ISS is
Exactly.
deorbited, and so they're not. You're going to need a lot more people than just single astronauts to fly up there. In fact, we're talking 10, 15, 20 years down the road. You're going to have space hotels. You're going to have specific space stations for commercial purpose, either for science or for industry manufacturing. And they're going to, rather than trying to uh, find somebody with multiple degrees and 20 years of pilot experience. They're going to find specialty people. They want people who are specializing in stuff
Exactly.
and then train them to be astronauts. And so you'll get a job that just happens to go to space. It might be very specialized and might be aerospace medicine, so forth, whatever. But yeah, they'll become, people your age, and even my grandkids will have careers in space. It'll just be something you go do for 6 months and then come home. But there will be a lot of people working in space. And like I said, I mean, Disney, Hilton, and Marriott have all talked about opening resorts, some kind of resort in space. Obviously, it's going to be going to the people going there will be who can afford it, but that's the way everything is. It starts off to be expensive and then becomes more mainstream, which is also what space tourism is all about.
Exactly. That's perfectly said. And I really hope we can continue spreading the message and not just keep it within ourselves as an industry, but really show everyone how space not only improves life for them here on Earth, but also how this futuristic talk is not so futuristic anymore in so many regards. Like this is real science that we're talking about, real things, real actionable, goals that are happening in the next 10, 15 years. And it's just very exciting to see where we will be for, the next generation. And so, with your journey so far, I mean, I think it's so clear to see that you've been on a path that wasn't always linear, but always, you always found your way to what you were excited about and you stuck with that passion, which I think is so admirable. But, I don't think anyone's story or journey is ever, completely easy where you just get everything on the first go. And so I'm really curious, like, did you have any obstacles in your journey? And if so, more importantly, how did you overcome them? A lot of times students, young professionals can look at someone and be like, oh, Andrew has done so much. He has so many connections. He knows so many astronauts. He has so many cool space friends. I'm sure he knows his stuff. Like he got very lucky, but I'm sure it's not very luck oriented, but a lot of work that you had to do. So I'm really curious, where did you have obstacles? And if so, how were you able to overcome them? What advice would you give?
Well, yeah, obstacles, yes, obviously. I mean, like I said, when I was a kid and I realized they weren't picking astronauts that wore glasses, and I had needed corrective lenses, so that was one obstacle. But at that age, I had so many different things to think about. But over the years, yeah, I've not getting my getting my college degree, and essentially, I spent a year in college and then went right into the family business doing television because I was turning work down, so it didn't make any sense to finish off to get a television degree because they really back in the early '80s the television degrees weren't that in depth, and I became an engineer and there was no degree for that, so it was all on the job training and so forth. But I've dealt with things like I had Osgood-Schlatter's disease on my knees, which is a weakening of the knees. So as I've gotten older, I've lost a lot of the cartilage due to tears and surgery. I've had to overcome that. I started losing my hearing about 5 years ago, which turns out to be genetic. So I wear hearing aids. I'm 62, and just everyday life, hearing aids make things better. But as a television engineer, my ears are part of my job for doing quality control and hearing what's going on. So that's been problematic. But you're right. It's not luck. I've talked about in previous times, years past, I've talked about being lucky enough to do work at NASA and stuff, but it's not luck. It's always having my eye on the ball, knowing what I want to do, and always being ready. If no matter what the situation is, be in a position to say yes. You may find yourself not being asked that question, but you just keep in mind that there's going to be an opportunity down the road. And I'll give you a perfect example. So I used to fly zero G back in the mid '90s. In 2022, a group of I-24 members were finalists in the Space Plus competition. Ruben Salinas, of course, won. But part of the follow-on to that was a zero-G flight. And it was going to be with Dr. Cyan Proctor, some other artists. Space Plus was doing this research flight and kind of reach out into art and Web3 and so forth. Well, I decided that I was the flying zero G was a bucket list thing for me. When I was working at NASA, it was all work, never got to have fun. So I signed up, bucket list. Wife says, go do it. So I go fly, get to fly with my friends and Cyan Proctor and a bunch of other, and Keith Young, one of our other I-24 members, which was great. Had a lot of fun, and got to re-experience the fun of zero G, which By the way, I was a little worried I was just going to flail around like everybody else, but my body in about 2 seconds remembered how to do it, and I was flying like Superman. So anyway, that would happen in October of 22. In early December, a group called Astro Access, which is a group set up to help people with disabilities prove that they can also go to space also. I had a zero-G flight, and I actually had heard about it back earlier in that July. So I'd taken that time off, the week off that they were going to be there just to volunteer. So I volunteered, showed up. I was picking up food, picking up drinks. I was running errands. I was ironing patches on flight suits. And then the zero-G plane coming over from Florida experienced a electrical problem and had to land, and they were going to be a day late. And one of their safety flyers, I believe it was even astronaut Scott Parris, couldn't stay. So George Whiteside, who was running the whole thing, came to me and said, Andrew, you flew zero-G. Would you like to fill in and be one of our safety flyers? I said, yep, put me in. So I got to fly zero-G because I was there. I was ready to go and said yes. And there's always opportunities like that. You just have to reach out, be bold. Don't be afraid to ask for help. That's the most important thing, I think, is don't be afraid to ask for help. Everybody in the space industry, and I'm sure you agree with me on this, everybody in the space industry in our world are very positive. There are very few negative people. Negative people don't survive very long in this group. So helping each other is the key. We're going to be making a new world out there in space, and we need the positive people to be involved with that. So I think this is great that we get to do it this way.
Amazing. I think you seriously hit the nail on the head on every single one of those points. I mean, I am a student myself right now, and I think every single piece of advice you said, first of all, greatly resonate with me and something and I'm sure everyone who's listening will have to keep in mind because, especially what you're saying about luck is not always something that you have to depend on. It's about putting yourself in these situations where you start to meet people, you start, opening up doors for yourself. I think it's so important to not just sit and wait around, but start unlocking those doors. And that's exactly what you did. I think it's a learning lesson for everyone, regardless of what stage in their career there is. If you want to be an analog astronaut or you want to, get on a zero-G flight, it's important to be like, oh, I'm going to wait. It's not like I'm going to wait for an opportunity to apply for something. It's, oh, how can I get there? Who can I talk to? What can I do? Like what, or even without a motive, let me attend these conferences where I can go for free, volunteer, meet some
Mhm.
people and learn. I think those are really important skills that we tend to not prioritize. I was once one of those students. I had no idea how to enter the space with zero connections. My parents are not in the industry. I was making excuses for myself, like, oh, I don't know anyone. I don't know anything. Like, what do I do? Like, I was making excuses, and I think that's completely wrong. Created a LinkedIn. I started connecting with people, started making a conscious effort to reach out, send those messages, take those risks. I'm a very introverted person, but then I started to get out of my shell and become someone who, is bold and can talk about things that she likes. And every single person should do that. And I think your story is a testament to that. Like you put yourself in all these places, you really chase that passion, and I think it's so inspiring that you didn't just wait around. You went for it, and you put yourself in these places where you can get recognized and find opportunities. I think that's something that a lot of people don't internalize. They just hear it and they don't actually take action for it, which
Yeah.
I think if everyone does, everyone can achieve their goals.
Yes, and the key there, and I mentioned volunteering. Volunteer wherever you can. You may not be able to afford to go to a
Yeah.
conference, but they always need volunteers. And when they see that you're volunteering, you're willing to put that effort in, that says a lot about you. In fact, something I haven't mentioned is I volunteer at Space Center Houston. I've been volunteering for 4 years now. And it was just after COVID and got involved because there was really nothing going on. And it was funny because when I worked at NASA at the Johnson Space Center, we did several live shows from Space Center Houston, but it never dawned on me to volunteer there until a friend of
Exactly.
mine, a friend of mine who was a volunteer says, "Hey, what are you doing these days? What are you just sitting around the house because the kids are all moved out?" Says, "Well, I got to find something to do. What do you think I should do?" Says, "Oh, you should volunteer at Space Center Houston." And it's like the giant light bulb went up my head, going, "That's
I know.
perfect." And one of the best times I have is volunteering there and getting talk to the people, especially the kids. I have to tell you, I had a conversation, an almost 2 hour on and off again conversation with a 9-year-old about black holes that I still
Amazing.
haven't parsed completely. This kid, his parents were like, this kid was on a fast track for early college, like 14 is going to go to college. He was into
Wow.
theoretical physics. He was talking about stuff. I'm not a scientist. I'm a television engineer. I play one on TV. Haha. But I can grasp some of those concepts, and black holes have always been very interesting to me because the concept, the possibility that what created our world creates then a black hole then recreates another universe, that kind of thing. And there's so much theory to go into that. But just talking to this kid and talking to just parents, every age, every age. I even have had, oh God, it's just the conversations themselves really get me excited, which in turn makes me more excited. And like I said, volunteer. If you're near some place that has a space museum or anything like that, like Huntsville, Alabama, Kennedy Space Center, wherever you're, volunteer. A science museum. Science museums are great because that's where people go to learn about that stuff. And if you want to go learn some more and help teach, go volunteer there. The connections are tremendous. You can make all kinds of connections everywhere. Or you could even join I-24 because we'll connect you as best we can.
Exactly. It's amazing. And it's just such a simple piece of advice, but I think every single student, every professional should hear it because like you said, it's just a light bulb that just needs to take that click of like, let's not sit around and wait around for opportunities to apply for,
Yeah.
but let's create these opportunities for ourselves. I think it's just a very small change in mindset. And, I just have to say, Andrew, like now that we were able to learn a little bit about your journey and this, journey, your advice, I'm just incredibly inspired. I think this is something that definitely is hard to come across just through Twitter or through LinkedIn or social media interactions. But truly, I am so inspired, and I'm sure every single person who's listening or who has learned about your story is incredibly inspired by what you're doing. And I think there's just so much to take away from what you've already been able to do in the space industry, not just in taking initiative to form something and to take it forward and being consistent with it over the years, but more importantly, creating opportunities for those around you and yourself through very simple means that sometimes seem hard for those who don't know how to enter this space. And so, really, thank you so much, Andrew, for doing this interview
Mhm.
and for sharing your work. I think it's going to inspire so many young change makers who will follow in your footsteps to try creating similar impact and hopefully continue to democratize space and to change this industry as we know it today. So, really, thank you for making your mark. I can't wait to see you in person one day and hopefully, continue to see the Inspire 24 crew grow into a more incredible and larger community internationally. So, thank you so much for doing this interview.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.